If you're using Visual Studio 2019 and .NET 5, you might have run into a problem with Windows Form apps using the data grid view. Myself, I'm just getting back into using C#, and I've been playing around with some of the very basics just to get back into the flow. And I ran into this. This is really my first time working with .NET 5 and some of the major changes. So to clarify, by the data grid view, I'm talking about the very simple data grid that you can pop onto a page and you select a data source and it populates the data. It's a real quick and easy way to pull data out of a SQL database or another data source. With .NET 5, of course, there are some changes, and you might have run into an error where it says that it's lost the connection to the server. Now, before I get into that, let me back up a bit and let me show you how I got to this point. And go ahead and close down Visual Studio. I want to show you exactly how I created this project that led to the problem. So I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to select the basic Windows Form app template. Now that's under C#, Windows, Desktop, and it's the Windows Form app. Not the .NET Framework one, but just the Windows Form app. Click Next. I'm going to call this Sandbox. And it's on my desktop. Click Next. Now, with this template, you can only target .NET 5 or the .NET Core 3.1. So I'm targeting .NET 5. Okay, so now we have our basic application. Let's wait until IntelliSense finishes loading. Now I've also noticed that sometimes it actually fails to open this form. There seem to be some issues with 2019, but now it's working fine. Let's go ahead and add a new data source to the form. This probably should have been my first clue. It's not letting us add data sources for this template under this window, but that's not the route that I went anyway. So let's close this. Let me go to the Server Explorer, where I have a couple of data connections defined. One is the AdventureWorks 2012 database. And let me go back to the toolbox and close this. And let me just go ahead and drag the data grid view over to the form. I'm going to right click on the project, add a new item, and under data, I'm going to select Dataset. So let's go ahead and create a table adapter in the dataset. Okay, so it sees the AdventureWorks 2012 connection. Click Next, use SQL statements. Let's go ahead and build a query. Taking a little bit of a shortcut here. Here's the query builder. I'm just going to select all columns. So it's selecting everything from the person table in AdventureWorks. And go ahead and click Next. Just accept the defaults. Finish. So it's created a table adapter in the dataset environment, and that's all set up. That should be accessible by the program. Go ahead and save that, close it. You can see it's right there under the project. Now we come back over here, choose data source, error using the dropdown. The connection to the server has been lost. Now I know that SQL Server is working on my machine. I can get to it just fine, but it's coming up with this error. I searched Google for a while looking for the solution to this and finally found it on Stack Overflow. Let me go ahead and do this right. So let's go ahead and close down Visual Studio, just clear everything out. Okay, so now I've restarted Visual Studio 2019, and I'm going to create a new project, and instead of the basic Windows Form app, I'm going to say Windows Form app .NET Framework. Now the .NET Framework is the previous version, 4.8 and prior, instead of just .NET. I'm going to create a new project under the .NET Framework. And again, I'm going to call it Sandbox. And you'll notice here, it actually gives you the option of selecting the previous frameworks. And I'm going to stick with .NET Framework 4.8. And you can see it came up with the form. Let's go ahead and add a data set. Now again, this is a really old way of doing this. You'll probably prefer to work with the Entity Framework or something like Dapper. But again, if you're working with an older project, or if you prefer some of the older methods, first let's go to Project, add a new data source, and you can see that the data source configuration wizard comes right up. Database, Dataset. It's looking at the AdventureWorks 2012 database, and it's going to save the connection as the AdventureWorks 2012 connection string. Click Next. Now click on Tables. I don't want them all, so I'm going to scroll down here, click on the Person table, and Finish. And it's actually created the data set itself. So let's go ahead and come down here, find the data grid view, drag that over, and let's choose a data source. And there's the project data sources. There's AdventureWorks 2012. There's a person table. And it's actually created the binding source. It's added the data set as an object and the table adapter that it just created. And let's expand that. Let's go ahead and start the project, or start the program, start the build. And it brings up the form. And as you can see, it's pulled up the data just fine. Again, the solution is that when you're wanting to work with that type of data source in Visual Studio 2019, when you're creating your project, you need to make sure you select the .NET Framework Windows Form app instead of the .NET 5. In retrospect, it seems really obvious, but it's one of those things that can hang you up for a while as you try to search down the source to that rather cryptic error message that 2019 threw at me. It's probably not the best implementation. Hopefully they'll get that bug worked out in the next version, but for now, there's a solution that I found. I hope you found this useful. If you did, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel and look for upcoming videos. Have a great day.